So yeah, I've been thinking about sort of some of you have asked me like, hey, how do you do services in React? And I've been thinking about that question, how to answer that question for a while. Had a chat with Jason as well a couple weeks back, and my immediate reaction was like, well, you can kind of do the same thing you did in Angular, as in you can write a class and you can new up an instance of the object of that class and you can just call methods on it. In most cases, services are singletons, and therefore you can just new up a single instance of the object and just make it a global variable, like expose that instance of the class on your module or something, and when you import, you just import that instance of the object, and there's your singleton. You can definitely do it that way. And if you want to do something like scoped injection, you could do a very similar thing using contexts. However, I also want you to know all of that is an option that's available to you. However, that's not in the spirit of React hooks. And React hooks is sort of a rethink of how you might reuse code, reuse UI component code. And I think while that's possible, we should explore this. We should explore how to reuse code in the React hooks paradigm. So I'm going to focus on this this time. So the scenario I have set up for you is this. This is a very simple example at the moment. There's an API call to fetch a to-do list, a list of to-dos, and renders it on the screen. And there's one thing you can do with these to-do items, which is to check them off or uncheck them. And I'm using a pretty nifty tool called Json Server, which gives you a REST API for zero work. It's like under 30 seconds. So I stood this thing up, and the way it works is, why do I have this debugger panel? Get rid of that. The way it works is there's this db.json file, and when you make an API request to update the so-called database, it just updates this file. You can see this go true and false right over here in the text file. I think that's pretty cool. So I'm using that as the backend. How do I get rid of this filter panel? Go away. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is, let me sort of walk through some of this code first. So in this example, which I called the fetch data on steroids, so far is relatively simple, but we're going to increase complexity as we go. We have this use state, which stores the current state of this list, which is an array of the tasks. And a task looks like that. And then we have this use effect that is going to make the call to fetch the information. I already extracted out a get data function, which would make it a little bit easier to extract the generic logic later. So this is going to fetch the to-dos and convert it into JSON format. And our use effect hook, or our use of the use effect hook, is going to get this data. And then we have this cancel flag. Yeah, we talked about this last time. It is just to avoid calling this set data if this component has already unmounted by the time that your request comes back. So this pattern is not super complex, but it's also kind of annoying to have to do all over the place. So part of the desire here of extracting a reusable custom hook is, hey, can I just have a custom hook do this tedious bit for me so I don't have to write this everywhere? Okay, so that's this bit and this bit and this bit here. Okay, so far very simple. So chances are you're gonna sort of develop a pattern like this, and then you will use this pattern twice or 3 times or 4 times. But again, we want to get rid of the tedium, so we're gonna extract this out into a reusable hook. So I'm just gonna copy and paste. I'll call this use fetch data, and just paste all of that code inside my custom hook. And again, a custom hook has to start with the word use, or React is gonna barf at you. So you have to call it use something. And in this case, the thing that we want to be a parameter is this get data function. So we already extracted this get data so that this is easily passed in as a parameter. So I'll say get data is the parameter, and get data is a function that should return me a promise of something. A promise of what? Okay, let's make it a type parameter. And then this guy, that's also going to be the type parameter. So whatever we're fetching, we get the data, and that's the data we want to set into our useState hook. So I'll say this useState hook is going to store a t or null, because initially we don't have the data yet. And then finally, to complete this, let's consider what stuff the user is going to need from like which variables the user of our hook is gonna need. Well, aside from this code, which we're gonna replace, we can comment that out and see look at the red lines here. Well, we definitely need data. The user needs data, and the user needs set data. Just like a state, the use state hook. So they need both of these things. So let's just return both of those back to them. And
why do you need set data?
Why do we need to set data? So we did need in the scenario that where we encountered me and Steven, we did need to set the data, and it's just like for the modification of the data when you change the checkbox. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna swap in our custom hook. And the parameter to our custom hook is gonna be our get data function. And I think TypeScript is happy, maybe. Does it know that we should define types for the output? So I'll say the return type is the first thing is gonna be a t or a null, and the second thing is gonna be a function where you're gonna pass in a t, and you don't care about the return value. So it's an array of the 2 elements like that. If that list gets longer, we'll probably want to expand that to an object instead of having an array. But it seems like React Hooks likes that pattern. Okay, so I'll just test it to make sure it still works? Okay, it does seem to still work. Okay, we got a warning here, and let's read this warning. And I want to address this. It says, React hook use effect has a missing dependency. Get data. Either include it or remove the dependency array. If get data changes too often, find the parent component that defines it and wrap that definition in use callback, which is another built-in hook. So what is going on? What is it saying to us here? It's basically saying React sees that this get data that is used here within the hook, within this use effect hook. This get data is passed in from the outside and could potentially change from one call of use fetch data to the next. It was not the case previously, because previously this stuff was inlined into the body, and it saw that, well, this get data is gonna be regenerated every time from within the elder function. But now that we extracted this custom hook, this could potentially be different for each render. Like maybe one of the renders I decide to fetch one data, fetch the data one way, but for the next render, because of a certain flag the user turned on, I need to use a different get data function, and I pass a different get data function. And if that were the case, we probably want to, fetch the data from the second data function. So because of that, what it's saying to us is that we should put this get data function as a dependency of this use effect, so that if in the subsequent call to this render function, this get data function, you decide to change the get data function, this call is made again. Okay?
Hey, Toby, I have a question on this, because I think it's something I've noticed. Isn't on line 33, I know that's a const.
Yeah.
Since it's inside a functional component, isn't that reference technically different every single time?
Yes.
Because the function is re-executing?
Yes, it is, and that causes secondary problems now that we're making that a dependency, and I'm gonna actually show you.
Okay, well, and just to make one other thing to confirm I'm fully understanding, and the reason the function as is without your refactor works is because even though get data is changing every time, in the use effect you did, you had dependencies of an empty array, so you're ensuring. Oh no, you don't even have dependencies of an empty array.
Previously, I didn't have dependency, and if I didn't put the dependency, it would actually be fine in this scenario. But it would not be fine if all of a sudden I decided to use a different get data function, or to a different URL. Then it would not refresh to the new data.
Exactly. We know 33 is going to end up being the same every time, even though it's technically new every time.
Yeah, it's exactly. That's a nuance of using this sort of scope/closure based rendering technique, which is kind of interesting, but it does have these.
An alternative would be to just pop that const up outside of the function.
Yes. Yeah. But let me show you. We're jumping ahead. Let me show you let me show you the negative consequence of of what I just did. We have this we have this request getting made over and over again. Why do we have this infinite loop now? Well, it's because every time a render happens, this get data function gets recreated, because you're saying get data is equal to this function expression, and that function expression is generating a new function every time that this render function gets called. Unfortunately, this render function gets called quite frequently. Every time React decided anything about the screen has changed, it'll call this render function. So every single time that's gonna be different, and because every single time that's gonna be different, some dependency has changed for our use effect hook, it's gonna make an API call again. That's a problem. And then whenever it makes an API call again, it's gonna set data again, which again triggers a render loop again, and that's gonna call this render function again, and the whole thing happens over and over again. So yeah, that's a real problem. How do you solve that? There's two ways to solve that. One way is to not regenerate this function, which is what Jason was suggesting. Not regenerate a new version of this function every single time you render. You move it outside of the scope, and this is a global constant that never changes, and that will solve this problem. Let's see that. I think it's still refreshing. Okay, I think it's calmed down now. Okay, so that's one way to solve this problem. Well, there might be situations where you don't want to do this, and if it is the case, then what React recommends you do is this. And this guy wants a dependency array as well. So you can use this use callback hook, which is a built-in hook. And when you do this, it sort of caches this version of the function, and it'll reuse it on the next turn, unless one of the dependencies in this list changes. If it does, then it'll use sort of the new one that gets generated on that render. So this should also solve the problem. Let's see that. So yeah, so that's the first thing. Curiously, we didn't encounter this problem in React Native when we were working on this. I'm wondering whether there's a subtle difference between what I'm using here for the demo versus React Native, but if you encounter this, then this is why. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is implement error handling. So what if sometimes there's an error coming back from the server, and we want to be able to handle that. So let's see if we can get that to happen. Yeah, we can get that to happen. So let's try to extend this custom hook to be able to handle errors. So I'm going to add a try catch block here. To sort of remember that there's an error, I'm going to make a new use state to store the error. And technically in JavaScript, error has a non-determinate type. There's no way to pin down what the type of an error is. Even TypeScript could not figure out how to do that, so I'm not going to try. Whoops, set error. Okay. So this way, whenever there's an error, we're gonna put it into this use state, And then now we're gonna return the error as well. And I said I was gonna change this to an object if it gets too much. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna call this object fetch data state. And it's going to have a data it's gonna have a generic type. The data is gonna be a T or a null. The set data is gonna be that. And then there's an error which is gonna be an any. So I'm gonna say the return type of our custom hook is this fetch data state. And then I'm gonna return those three things here. Okay, so now we update this syntax here. And we have access to an error field now, and we can do something like, hey, if there's an error, we're gonna do an early return. We're gonna assume the error has a message field. Okay, so we can do something like this. Let's see if that works. Okay, so I think if I just, oh, did that work? Request failed. There was a problem. Okay, sometime 50% of the time is gonna fail. And yeah, this time it worked. Okay, so we have a way to indicate an error on the page now. And we added that logic into the custom hook as well. One more thing, we want to be able to retry, as in we want, when there's an error, we want on the error page, we would like a retry button, and the user clicks on it, it'll retry making the request again. Okay. Yeah, so we would like to put a button here that says try again, and then when you click on try again, then it will attempt another fetch. So how do we do that? One thing you need to consider is how to get the code inside the use effect to happen again, and that's based on your dependency list. So there's no direct way to say call this function again, or you're not supposed to anyway. There is a direct way. You can move this, give this function a name and call it again, but you're not supposed to do that. What you're supposed to do is you want to get this stuff to happen again because one of its dependencies has changed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a new use date. I'm using these use dates like class variables, basically. And I'm going to have just one counter that's going to count up. I'm just going to start that counter at 1, and then I'm going to count it up to 2 if I want to retry. And because that number would have changed, it's going to force this to re-execute every time I do that. So I'm going to call this try number. So at the beginning, the try number is 1, and if you click on retry, it's going to increment the try number to 2, and I'm going to put that in the dependency list. And because it changed from 1 to 2, it's going to force this use effect to execute again. That's the plan. Okay, So because of that, what we can do to retry, we're gonna return a retry function. Okay, so and we're gonna return that back to the user of our hook. And the retry function is just a function that has no parameters and no return value. They can call the retry function and they will cause this to re-execute. And the way it works is we're just gonna set the try number to try number +1. And basically, I think we probably also wanna reset the error to nothing. I probably want to, well, the data would not be there if there's an error. I don't think I necessarily need to set the data. Although I'll do it just in case. Yeah?
I'm wondering if you should set error inside the fetch data function and not in the retry.
Why? You're saying in here?
It's still synchronous anyway.
You're saying in
I
here?
was thinking like before, like right when you call fetch data, you want to set error as null to avoid like extra renderings. But no, I guess it doesn't matter. Never mind.
Okay. I wasn't totally following you though. On what line before?
So I guess I would set error in the fetch data function. We'll probably do it like after we get data. So like.
Say, here.
Yeah, here.
That makes sense. Yes. Yeah. That's a good point. I should probably do that. But in the case that we probably also want to do it in retry, because if it jumped into this set error block, then when you retry, you want to clear off the previous error that happened here, that got set here.
My concern is that, let's say if you listen to error in the component and you want to display some kind of message, and then you click on the retry button, and you probably still want that message there until the request comes back.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Not necessarily. You might want a loading page again, while it's loading again.
Yeah, I mean, you probably should, like, you're probably gonna have like the error message, and like a retry button right there. And in my mind, when you click retry, the button goes disabled, and this shows some kind of loading, but you still have the message there. But anyway.
Okay, yeah. That's a good point. You may want to design the UI that way. I haven't thought about designing it that way, but so if that's the case, then you don't set it here, and then, but it's still gonna show loading while it's still displaying the error message, and then, okay, we're gonna try it that way. So now we're gonna have access to this retry button, and then we're gonna render it on this error page. Okay, so let's try that. See if we can get an error. Okay, retry, try again. That does not seem to work. Oh, okay, I think it worked. It's just that it errored again the second time. Let me monitor this network panel here. Okay, I think it worked. But yeah, your point about showing the loading. How should we show the loading here? So maybe it's like if the data is null, if data is null, then we're gonna show trying, otherwise nothing. Let's see if that works. Oh. Data was already null. Data would be null. Data is null doesn't tell us it's loading though.
Do you want to like a separate state for retrying? Because like right now you make an assumption that that loading is based on data, which might not be true. You might not reset data.
Yeah. When we did it with Steven, we had a separate loading flag. Was trying to get away with not having that, but we could do that. But okay, let's go ahead and do that.
One alternative, you could have a third type for data as undefined. Let's set it to undefined.
Undefined means, or like loading. But then what if the data is actually the string loading? That would be a problem. yeah, that's a we'll do it this way. So I guess if we do it this way, then here we're loading, and then here we're no longer loading, and here we're no longer loading. Yeah, and then we'll need to return the loading state as well. Okay, I hope that works. Let's see. Okay, so now we can probably, I'm gonna change this logic to say if not loading, then we render the list, otherwise we render this label, and over here, if loading, I'm gonna show this trying text label. Okay, let's see if that worked. What? Oh, cannot read property map of. Oh, there's a point in time when it's not loading. Maybe I flip these so that the set data happens first. No, that didn't fix it. What's the problem? This sets the loading.
Yeah, are you setting data to null before loading is true?
Where? Here?
Yeah, doesn't data becomes null?
Oh, there. Yeah, when I do this, it sets data to null before loading is true.
But we didn't get to the retry button yet.
I suppose we could do this. I mean, alright, I think this would fix it, but it's not ideal because we're setting loading twice.
Yeah, I think what Ilya said, though, we didn't do the retry, so it's because loading is initialized to false. the data is already null.
Oh, load. You're right. Initially, we were not loading. Okay. So at the beginning, we were not loading. Can we just set true initially? Because we assume the very first time is always gonna load. Maybe we can do that, although that seems a little bit wrong, but...
Should we just add like a check in the component render function for loading and data?
We can do that, but I'm kind of trying to not do it because that would make the user's job a little harder, but that still didn't fix it. Okay, let's just, if not loading and we have data. Well, this will fix it. I think there's a slightly more elegant way to do it, but all right, let's just go with this for now. So, all right, let's try to get the error to happen. And now if we try again, oh, it says trying. Okay, nice. That's what we wanted. That trying. This trying here. Okay, so, and it still failed. So we try again, and now it works. Okay. So I think that's the end of this example. It's perhaps a more involved custom hook, but I think this is a good showcase of what code reuse with React hooks is like. Whereas with when you were doing Angular components and you had code that's like, you had logic that's more complicated and your class is getting bigger and bigger and you wanted to extract it out, usually you reach for making a service and put the code in there. React hooks, they recommend doing it this way. One thing I would point out though is that you want to be conscientious about how frequently your render function is happening. If this render function is happening more than the expected number of times, you might have a bug in your custom hook logic. And it could negatively affect the performance of your UI. So you might want to from time to time put a console.log here and double check that that's not firing an unreasonable number of times. It might be kind of firing an unreasonable number of times, maybe already. It did it 5 times. When I'm changing the checkbox, it is only doing it 1 time. So one thing is the initially this rendered once, which is right because that's the time you need an initial render to trigger this use effect to fire off the request. When the request comes back, it should set these things. And I'm thinking it's kind of happening more than I'm hoping for, because I think each one of these set function calls triggers a separate render. When it failed, it went into this catch block, which triggered 2 renders, I think. And when it succeeded, I see 3 renders. So 1, 2, 3. So I wasn't planning on going into this, but let's do this. So we did this in our pairing session last week as well. We actually decided to, in order to minimize the number of re-renders, we merged all of these data into a single object, and so that when we're doing a set data, we are doing one single set to make all three changes at once. So perhaps that's what we do here.
I have sort of a related question, I guess.
Yeah.
Would this be a good opportunity to use the use reducer hook, or is that like overkill?
Oh, I think that's still overkill for this one. But that is an option. That is an option. If I would say that the reducer hook is probably the reducer hook is probably more valuable when you're trying to coordinate between multiple UI components. As in you want your child components to be able to make updates to your state. So you use a reducer hook and you share that with your child component. The child components are going to dispatch events to your reducer, but you're in charge of how those specific action events going to modify the state.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'd like to see an example of that sometime.
Okay. We can arrange that. Because to me, because the reason I say that is the reducer hook requires more structure, more setup, and more code. Like it has more structure, requires each part to do more, and for that to be worth it, I think, you need it. It's more like a control mechanism. It's like a traffic control. So it makes sense when there's more things going on that you have to coordinate. But I think this is small enough that it's not at that point yet. So here I'm thinking just, wait. I want to call this state object the fetch data state now. Perhaps I should rename this to fetch data thing. I'll just call this fetch data, and then I'll use the name fetch data state for just the internal state that fetch data has, which I think is this, this, and this. Okay, so I'm gonna say, instead of these 4 use states, I'm gonna merge them into one. And if you read the React hooks FAQ, which I recommend a reading of that, by the way, they have extremely good documentation in general. They do mention like the choice between, like, how do you choose between using multiple use states or merging all of the data into one single use state. They do have something about that. And they say both are, there's reasons to do either way. I'm not seeing it.
Good. I saw it. Let's go down. Right there. Should I use one or many state variables?
Up more? Should
down.
This one, yeah.
There.
Okay, yeah. So they do cover this, and they're saying, so should I merge them, like, all 4 into one? Or what is their position? They're saying group the related things, and yeah, I think that makes sense. group their related things. But just realize that you have both options. And in this case, I think of all this stuff to be related, and I want to reduce down the number of re-renders it has to do. For UI performance reasons, although I don't think it'll kill the performance in this case. It's not a big update in all the cases. It's not going to be a big update. But I also, because this is like a reusable hook that I want developers to use, I don't want them to like sound the alarms when they see an unexpected number of re-renders, right? So initially, what should we have at? We'll do whatever we put in here. Okay, so now we're gonna need to update these calls. Oops, no, set state. Like that. And then, so here where we had 3 set calls, now that just becomes 1 call. So doing that is gonna allow us to have only 1 re-render. And then this one becomes 1 set as well. And this one also becomes a single set state.
Hey Toby, I've been kind of multitasking, so sorry if I missed this.
Okay.
Even if you called set state multiple times on different variables like that, your change is occurring synchronously, so there would still only be 1 ultimate re-render for all of the changes. But you're saying it actually still will re-render 3 separate times for each change.
It's kind of strange because I have seen it both ways, and it's just when I was testing just now, I saw multiple ones.
I'm curious to see if the change you just did reduces the re-renders.
Yeah.
I would guess that it won't.
You guess it won't. I guess
Correct.
I guess I don't know. I like when I was doing it by myself, I didn't see multiple, and I thought it was okay. But now during the demo, I saw it multiple times. Let's see what.
It's interesting. You're making me doubt myself, but that's what I would have said.
But the multiple re-renders is also what we saw when I was pairing Steven last week. But yeah, let's try it. But it feels like there's no definitive answers. But anyway, so here, I think I'm just gonna spread the state. No, that might be too much. I'm gonna do state.data. What? Set data. No, I meant. Oh. Now there's a problem because we no longer have a function called set data. But yet the consumer of our custom hook wants to have a function called set data. So I'm gonna write that function. Oops. And then now they can have a set data. Okay, and I think making that change was completely internal, and the user of this hook didn't have to know about it. So let's retest it. It's still compiling my TypeScript. Okay, that was still 3 times. I don't know if we did anything. It's 3 times. Let me see. Switch to a different one. Switch to this. Oh, the first 2. First there was 2, and then after the request there's only 1, which previously after the request there was 3. Oh, when I click the button, it's 2 times.
I think the reason there is 3, can you go back to the code? When you retry, you set data first, and then the retry function. So you said, so you said this is one set state. Then
and then this guy happens. Yeah, you're right. So yeah, when you click retry, first this happens, and then this happens. So maybe what we can do is merge that by not doing it here. And I think we don't need to do it here if we set that to true initially. Can we do this? Just set it to true initially. I'm gonna try it. And then when we start the retry, we're gonna say loading is true, so that we don't have this thing, and then a set right here to trigger the 2 renders. All right, so this will probably be better. Okay, let me try. Okay, so there's only 1 now. Only 1 and then 2, and that's the minimum number of re-renders that we should have. I don't know about this error, but let me finish testing this. Trying to get the error. Come on. Okay. So there's 2. We try again. There's 2. So I think that did solve the problem. I'm still confused myself, Jason. As in,
Toby, so yeah, this is really interesting to watch. Because you were able to make it in place without really changing anything else, like, can you change those 3 sets back to 3 sets instead of 1?
you know what?
I might see the same results.
Yeah. I'll just do it like this.
Sure. Yeah, that would have the same effect.
But wait, you won't.
Well, yeah, there's still only 1.
You need to use the function because it. State.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could just go back to exactly what it was before.
Okay.
That's what I'd be curious.
No, I mean, I think if you pass the function into set state instead, and it will always then reference the oldest value. If that makes sense.
What now? If you
pass the function into set state, like if you
like this.
Yeah, and get state from as an argument of this function. So set state
like that.
Yeah. So this way you'll always reference the oldest value, and maybe this way you can make multiple sets and not
right. I mean, I think that's cool. I'd like to still see it exactly the way it was.
Okay.
We're experimenting.
All right, let's undo all the way back. And yeah, because I'm kind of like confused myself.
Won't this also undo the other change you made?
Which change?
You changed the way the loading was handled on the retry to get rid of the additional.
Oh yeah, we could after we do this undo, maybe we could recreate that fix.
Okay.
This is exactly why I prefer observables outside the hook, and then just reference observables inside the hook to avoid this kind of stuff when like you want to retry, so you need to like update the state, which causes re-render, which causes use effect, which causes another state update. I would rather like do it outside with like behavior subject, and then distinct until changed, and then it will just give you the actual change every time, not this like.
Well, learn the customs first before you say it's bad, right? When you visit a new country, you should learn their customs first before saying that's not the right way to do it. So I would say learn how to do it the best way in both scenarios, in both paradigms. So let's try to figure this out. So this is fine. I think this is back to where it was, but we can put this one, get rid of this line, and put it inside the retry. Okay. Yeah, we get 3 re-renders after the data came back.
It's pretty crazy.
And when there's an error, we get 2 re-renders after the data came back because we have 2 sets when for the error case.
So
I guess they must be because they can't it's not re-rendering in between. Like it can't re-render in the middle of synchronous code because it's synchronous code. So it must be going on some sort of stack. So that you don't miss states. I think that's probably like who are they to assume that you would want to group states, I guess.
You're saying like after you're saying inside this set data is doing a re-render. Oh, I'm gonna do a console.log.
Yeah, like because technically, like I don't know, is their approach that technically there's a point in time where loading is false, but error has not been set yet? Yeah, like. And how are they executing that?
Well, this is the error case.
Yeah.
Yeah, render, and then after set data, render after set loading, render after
That's
set.
crazy. So it's actually rendering. Wow.
It's rendering inside of the set function.
I thought you just said that it's not. It's reducing like all of them at once. Like I thought you just said that it was the same behavior as we expected when we had all those states in one object. Was it not?
No.
Tons more logs.
I think we disproved that claim.
Oh, okay.
So I guess this is a, yeah.
That's insane news to me.
Okay, so yeah, that is interesting. And maybe I might do a little bit of research, see if I can read more into this, why it works this way. But given our experiments, I would say I would probably recommend this approach, this merged object approach, more, especially for like a reusable hook that you want other people to use a lot of times. You probably want to optimize it like this.
Yeah, maybe with behavior subject as well.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's a good place to stop here. And yeah, if you have suggestions for what examples you want to see in the future, let me know. Or if you want to discuss more about React hooks or subjects, I did plan like a observable based example, but we didn't have time to get into it, so perhaps we can do that in the future. Okay, thanks everyone.